Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Well, it began with a cozy cabal, the G6. Then along came Canada and Russia, and all of a sudden the G8 became the new word in global diplomacy. Now, these days, leadership summits have been supersized, and the G20 has become the one-stop shop for tackling the world's most pressing problems. Now, that's the idea, at least. Except these days, according to my guest today, Ian Bremmer, G20s, G8s, G-anythings for that matter, don't really tackle much at all. Bremmer is the president of the Eurasia Group. That's a political risk consultancy firm in Washington. He's also author of a new book that is called Every Nation for Itself, Winners and Losers in the G0 World. That's right, you heard it, G0. He argues basically that the world is facing a void of global leadership for the first time in 7 decades. And I thank him for joining us today from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Ian, I'll cut to the chase. I'm about to leave in a few weeks to go cover the G20 summit in Los Cabos, Mexico. Should I unpack my bags? Should I stay at home? Is it just not worth my while to go?
It's not the best use of your time. I mean, certainly there are a lot of leaders there, and the interviewing process on the sidelines is worthwhile. And look, it's always good for world leaders to have a chance to meet and understand each other. But that's very different from actually moving the ball, from responding to crises, to proactively setting a global agenda. The G20 is not doing that. And it's not just because there are too many countries, though frankly that is a problem. It's because the countries don't agree on most things. The G6, the G7, even the G7 plus one, you were talking about a group of countries that more or less agreed with each other most of the time. I mean, they had similar political and economic systems. They were all the advanced industrialized nations. They were wealthy countries. That's not true anymore. And it's not that the new countries that have joined the G20 are nasty or evil or malevolent. It's that on most issues, there is no fundamental agreement. And so the G20 is aspirational. It's great if it worked, but it doesn't. And as a consequence, where we are left is the G0.
And you actually, you liken the G20 at one point in your book to sort of a herding of cats together with animals that don't particularly like cats. Now, I mean, the question is, you said it's not a question of just putting all these people in the same room, they disagree. How else are you going to resolve the world's problems? I mean, you know, it's difficult today, given the diversity of the world, to get people to agree. Isn't this the best way of trying to bang the heads together?
Well, you tell me. I mean, we've had summits on climate for a number of years now, global summits. We had Copenhagen, we had Cancun, we had Durban. I mean, how many global summits do we need to have on climate that completely fail before we understand that we're not going to get it done globally? Now, you can say, well, it's a global problem. Don't we have to get it done globally? And my answer to you is, if it is completely apparent that you cannot get leadership at a global level, it behooves us, because the problem is becoming significant, to do it at a more localized level. Look, what I'm basically saying is, we had a world after World War II where the United States, with its allies, was driving effectively a G1 plus world. And whether it's the World Bank or the IMF or the Bretton Woods Accords on currency, all of those organizations were effectively driven by the United States. I'm saying that after 2008 and the financial crisis, you're no longer going to see U.S.-led global institutions and leadership. Instead, you could have U.S.-led institutions that aren't global, but you're not going to have them as global anymore.
And yet you're not a declinist in the sense of you wouldn't argue really that America is in decline. I mean, it is still by far the largest power when it comes to this type of global symmetry and trying to drive things forward.
Look, I mean, this isn't great for the United States, don't get me wrong, but let's be clear. I mean, you're looking at Syria right now, and Bashar Assad is still in place, and these horrible atrocities and a civil war which is starting to spill across its borders into Lebanon and Turkey. And if the United States refuses to provide leadership to help to remove Assad from power, that's a problem at the margins for the U.S. It's a much bigger problem for the Syrian people, for the Lebanese, for the Saudis, the Qataris, you name it. The U.S. is leaving Afghanistan in 2014. I was talking to some Chinese officials recently and said, well, look, you know, the Brits did it, the Soviets did it, the Americans did it. Isn't it your turn? And the Chinese answer is absolutely not. It's a cesspool. We're not touching Afghanistan. Well, this is a much bigger problem for Pakistan and India than it is for the United States. So my point is not that the G0 is a happy place, but certainly if the United States is not going to be the world's policeman or the lender of last resort, if the U.S. isn't going to lead globalization, that is actually a much bigger problem for other countries than it is for America.
It's a big problem, but specifically going back to the Syria conflict here, the big roadblock, as you know and I know, has been Russia so far in the Security Council, to a lesser degree China. What do you do? What is the format, in your opinion, for conflict resolution when you have a body such as the UN Security Council and you have one holdout, Russia in this case, refusing to go along?
Well, I guess the point of the G0 is that we have to understand that we're prepared to tolerate a lot more chaos than we're usually willing to admit. I mean, we say that Bashar Assad must go. Well, I suspect we're going to be here in January 2013, and Bashar Assad's still going to be there. So what are the consequences? I mean, we told the North Koreans if they tested a nuke, we'd be really angry. They tested a couple nukes. Okay, I'm sitting in Washington. We're angry. What are we doing with that?
Well, your book, the title of your book, the first part before that colon, Every Nation for Itself. So what are you saying? Should the U.S. now, encourage or give the wherewithal to countries that are inclined to arm the opposition? What specifically, concretely should be done in this Every Nation for Itself model?
Look, I think the best that you can hope for in this environment is you try to put together coalitions of the willing. Now, we typically talk about that in terms of wars, but coalitions of the willing could involve monetary policy or climate or trade. It could involve economic statecraft and dealing with cybersecurity. On each of these issues, you're going to have non-global responses. They will be less than ideal responses. They will be half measures, but that's better than no measure whatsoever. And on Syria, yes, you're not going to remove Assad, and the opposition is weak and frankly disenfranchised because a lot of people believed that on the ground in Syria that once Kofi Anan came in, that was going to provide NATO the impetus to remove this guy. Well, I haven't seen that. Nobody else has either. And the Russians have shown they're more than willing to stop this from happening.
And some people would argue that the Kofi Annan peace plan has actually just given Assad cover. It's bought some time for the West because there's no appetite for military intervention. So it looks like you're doing something, but you're not.
I mean, certainly, getting some observers in there probably reduced the violence for a short period of time. So from a purely humanitarian perspective, you can argue that there was some improvement at the margins. But definitely the Kofi Annan initiative was a whole bunch of countries sitting around a table saying, well, we don't know what to do. And the Russians saying, we will not support cutting off envoys. We will not support cutting off economic aid. And by the way, we've got a couple military bases in Syria, so why don't you go scratch? The Russians do not agree with us actively on Syria or on Iran right now, and on issues like Afghanistan and Europe, they're at the margins. So, I mean, really, where are the Russians providing support to the G7? What exactly is the +1?
Right.
Very hard to say.
Right. Ian, in the little time we have left, the part of the title of your book, After the Colon, the winners and losers in a G0 world. Tell us about some of those winners and losers. Where do you see the equation?
Winners in the G0 world, first of all, in a world that's going to be much more volatile, you don't just look for growth, you also look for resilience. And so Japan, which has no growth but has extraordinary resilience, does a little bit better. The United States, which has some growth and a lot of resilience, looks more attractive. The U.S. dollar doesn't get hammered in the G0. That does mean that the U.S. policymakers down the road here in D.C. won't go as fast as they otherwise might. A bunch of other countries that do well are those that can adapt between different models of leadership and integration that aren't global, such as Indonesia, such as Turkey, such as Brazil. Most of Africa does well in this environment. Even a country like Canada that can pivot between the United States and Asian states who need access to their energy resources do better in a G0 world.
So sort of the more emerging countries, the more agile countries, whereas much larger powers are more like these big ships that take a long time to turn.
A ship that takes a long time to turn, as long as it's not going to sink, does relatively well. The countries that will do the worst are the ones that look like they can grow really fast but can get knocked over by any shock, because you're going to see so many more risks in a G0 environment that aren't addressed adequately because of the lack of global leadership.
To sort of wrap up here, turning to Europe, eurozone crisis, there have been glimmers of hope, perhaps in Greece, signs that maybe they will cobble together some sort of coalition on June 17th. Where do you see this crisis shaping up? I think you wrote about it as being Groundhog Day recently, back essentially where we were in January.
I know, it does feel like that movie. Of course, the interesting thing about Groundhog Day is that while it seemed endless, it did eventually come to an end. And I think the same thing is true with the eurozone, but the process is no fun. We're dragging it out. And we're dragging it out incrementally precisely because it's the only way you get responsible governance, and it's the only way you build improved architecture and institutions. The Germans understand that. They want a rule-based Europe, not just German leadership. And of course, Brussels understands that too. So I think we get through June 17th by the skin of our teeth, as we have so many times, and then Spain is very much back in our focus and concerns about the Spanish banking system, and then Italy down the road as well. But we are incrementally getting our way through this eurozone crisis.
Last word: new president here in France, François Hollande. Some people say he's changed the dynamic, talking a lot about growth. Has he changed the dynamic, or is Germany still basically dictating terms?
Merkel talks some more about growth now, too. I think this is absolutely part of a broader dynamic where countries understand that competitiveness has to be created, more trade, more free trade agreements have to be created, and also countries can only handle so much austerity. Merkel is still in the driver's seat. Hollande is very supportive of the eurozone, of course, and is very supportive of Merkel. Surprising that Merkel was as proactive in campaigning for Sarkozy as she did. Certainly there has to be some bad feeling about that on the personal side, but I don't think it affects the German-France relationship much at all.
Well, we're going to have to see if we can find a way out of Groundhog Day. I think in the movie he finally did. Ian Bremmer, we're going to have to leave it there. Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group, political risk consultancy in Washington, also author of the new book, Every Nation for Itself, Winners and Losers in a G0 World. Thank you very much for being here today, and thanks to all of you for watching the interview on France 24.
My pleasure.